Yo, what's up? It's finally time to rank the best German weapons in Enlisted. This list contains no fluff or bullshit or sentimental value. Every single weapon featured here is highly superior to all other weapons and is guaranteed to perform greatly in high difficulty matches. So, if you want to build the strongest possible German army in Enlisted, this is all you need to look for. And we start with the Hungarian masterpiece, the Kar98k. If you want a depiction of how good this weapon is, it's better than the 15 German SMGs that come before it. In fact, before the merge, its Soviet counterpart was the PPSH, which is regarded as one of the best weapons in the game overall. But unlike the PPSH, the Kar98k is actually hard to use. Reason for that is, the Kar98k is one of the perfect examples of a weapon that only becomes good if you play it optimally. Coming with a fire rate of almost 900, it's gonna melt away every enemy close up to you. But even at medium distance of 100 meters, it still needs only 3 to 4 hits to kill every enemy in the game. So combining the high fire rate with the high damage and the high capacity 40 round magazine and the very fast reload speed of 2 seconds, this is just a monster of an SMG. The only things that keep this weapon remotely balanced is the recoil. The vertical one of 32 and the horizontal of 12 means that you won't have any problems controlling it horizontally, but if you spray it, especially on distance, the vertical recoil starts setting up. This means you really have to train your aim, you really have to train controlling the recoil when you use this weapon, and of course it has to be completely upgraded. As every weapon in this list, I go from the completely upgraded versions, since if you want to play maximum power matches, you obviously want to have maximum power weapons. It will take a while to get used to it, because controlling the recoil if you want to spray full auto on long distance is really hard, but it becomes absolutely worth it. But there are 2 more reasons why the Kar98k is the 10th best weapon of the German army. First is, unlike assault rifles that you can put only on assaulters, you can put this one on multiple soldier classes, not only assaulters, but also pilots, tankers, and APC drivers, making the Kar98k the best weapon these additional classes can receive. This is also what turns your tanks with 5-man crews or your planes, for example the Junker 188 with 5-man crews, into very potent and viable assaulter crews with additional mobility. With other weapons like the MP40 or the 40 round Berettas or the recently buffed CK, these classes would also be good, but they wouldn't be able to compete with normal full power fighting squads like enemy assaulter squads or machine gunners. But the Kar98k makes it absolutely dangerous for the enemies to engage your tankers and pilots once they left their vehicles. And the last argument that shows the strength of the Kar98k is the fact that it's so good, you can even use it as a secondary weapon in addition to assault rifles. Usually assault rifles are just much better than SMGs. But assault rifles, while being great at mid-range and good on long and short range, are still just good on short range. Meaning, if you're up against an enemy with a fast-firing SMG, or fast-firing machine gun, or fast-firing rifle, you will be at a severe disadvantage. But not if you have a Kar98k as a secondary. Meaning, if you play your assaulters, you can give them an assault rifle as the primary weapon for the first weapon to engage enemies. But if you're close into buildings or if you're surrounded by enemies suddenly, just switch to your Kar98k and you're gonna have a significant advantage against them on short range thanks to its very high fire rate combined with the quite high damage. So overall, the Kar98k absolutely deserves its spot on this list from its power. And you also get one of the best weapon sounds in the game on top of that. At number 9 we have the first iteration of the German assault rifles in the technology tree, the MKB-H. MKB stands for machine carbine, and as the name implies, it was an early version of what later became the STG Sturmgewehr assault rifle. In real life, the weapon was designed from 1940 to 1941. The first prototypes, of which 35 were deployed to the Eastern Front, were tested on mid-1942, and eventually the first few thousand mass-produced versions were sent to Leningrad in 1943. Its history in Enlisted reaches back before the merge, when it was the counterpart to the Soviet Fedorov. And its relevance for your German army becomes clear once you try it out the first time. This is the first weapon that gives you a significant advantage over other nations. Since Germans play against British, American and Soviet equipment, this weapon easily defeats all of the others. The ridiculously high assault rifle damage of 9.6 on short range and 7.5 on mid range means that on short range you easily one-shot injured enemies, and even enemies who have vitality will instantly die from 2 hits on mid range. There's basically no way to survive 2 hits from this weapon, and headshots will easily kill even through cover. Now combine this with the very moderate fire rate of 500 and relative to that very low recoil of 38 and 10, you get a weapon that's not only fast firing relative to a semi-auto or bolt action, but also almost as hard hitting. So you will easily land all or most of your shots, and your enemies will very quickly die, and it's not even hard to control this weapon. So the MKB is basically the opposite of the Kirali. The Kirali is hard to use, but gives you a high payoff and is specialized on short range. The MKB is very easy to use, suffers on short range due to the very low fire rate, at least for an assault weapon, but the ridiculous damage and the high precision on mid and long range makes it absolutely worth it using it. With a good standard magazine size of 30 rounds and a fast reload speed of 2.4, there's nothing that will interfere with you spraying your enemies. All in all, this is a great entry weapon for high BR German games, and as already explained, dual wielded with the Kirali will be a perfect synergistic team of 2 weapons that cover all of your bases. Number 8 brings us to one of the most technologically advanced, one of the most stylish, and one of the most liked weapons in the German tech tree, the FG42. This weapon just has it all. It has ridiculously high semi-auto rifle damage, easily killing every enemy, even soldiers with vitality on short range due to the 14.4 damage. It kills normal soldiers without vitality on mid distance up to 100 meters with 11.8 damage, and it even kills injured soldiers on 200 meters, basically across the whole map, on 200 meters range with 9.6 damage. So as long as someone doesn't have vitality, he will instantly die. And even if someone has vitality, due to the 830 bullets per second speed, you easily get a second shot into your enemies. So this weapon absolutely has it all when it comes to how you play it. And this playstyle that the stats of the weapon enable is also perfectly historically accurate, making this weapon one of the greatest depictions of real-life weapons. In real life, the FG42 was created for German paratroopers, since the name says Fallschirmjägergewehr, which is paratrooper rifle, and the specifications for the prototypes were extremely complicated. And somehow, some engineers and designers managed to complete everything, and this is why you have a weapon that has so many ridiculously good stats. And one of these specifications was that that weapon can be used as a normal standard rifle, but also as a machine, as a light machine gun, as a mobile machine gun. Therefore you have it in full auto, though it was intended to be used in bursts, not on full auto spraying, as you can see from the only 20 bullets magazine size. And it works perfectly. The little burst that you can shoot with this, if you shoot 2 or 3 bullets every time, you have up to 7 bursts. Up to 7 bursts means you easily completely destroy a whole enemy squad, possibly even 2. And if enemies come close up to you, you can just forget about the bursting and just completely spray into your enemies, and everyone will die. So depending on the distance, you have a great weapon on long range, a superbly strong weapon on mid range, and on short range, if enemies are close enough, it's still one of the best weapons in the game, because you just spray them away with your insanely high damage. Obviously, the 2 things that keep this weapon remotely balanced are the relatively high recoil of 53 and 19, meaning you cannot spray it like that easily on longer distances, and the small magazine size of only 20 bullets, which is humongously big for a semi-auto rifle, but very ridiculously small for a full auto weapon. So you see, this weapon is a perfect mix of different weapon types and a perfect representative of German technology in World War II. So once you reach the FG42, the age-old question whether you should use bolt-action rifles or semi-auto rifles is finally over, because the FG42 just beats both. Once you unlock this weapon, absolutely put it on every soldier that you can as your new standard rifle, and be very happy about the ridiculous power level jump that you get from that. Also, fun fact for the end, the magazines from the FG42 are the same as from the ZB machine gun. Number 7 brings us to the core of German squad tactics in World War II, the machine guns, specifically the MG34 with Patronentrommel. In real life, this was the most commonly used machine gun by German troops, and you're well advised to not only have it on your tanks and planes, but also on your infantry squads. Because the damage output this thing brings is insane. With over 13 damage on short range and almost 12 damage on mid range, everything you see on the map will die with one shot most of the time. Being a machine gun, it comes with quite a high horizontal recoil, meaning controlling it is very hard, almost impossible. So what you want to do is, you want to one-tap enemies using it like a semi-auto rifle with 75 bullets. On long range, you can even burst once you learn how to control the recoil a bit. You can do 3 bullet bursts, and usually 1 or 2 bullets will hit and the enemy will die, no matter how far away he is. And if enemies are close to you, you can even just start spraying from the hip fire. Even with the high dispersion penalty that you get from that, you will still hit every enemy easily thanks to the ridiculous high fire rate of 880 per minute. But the real magic unfolds once you start bipodding the MG34, because then you get literally 0 recoil and you can completely and utterly spray away everything you see on the map with ease. You don't even need to aim properly, you can just use your A and D buttons to traverse your aim horizontally, and there's nothing easier than to hit enemies like this. So yeah, this weapon used properly, used strategically, meaning with patience, getting into a good position, or possibly scouting for enemies and waiting or surprising enemies. Once you get a good line of sight to your enemies and a good position for your machine gun, there's nothing that can stop you. The main reason to use the MG34 above the other machine guns, especially the MG15, which you unlock even later, is that it has a perfect mix of stats. First of all, it has the highest magazine size of 75. Then you get a perfect fire rate, perfect also relative to the recoil, because unlike the MG15, you can easily control it, and even while hip firing or just spraying from the go, you will land most of your shots. MG15 will waste most of your bullets, not even landing 1 bullet very often, and just leading to 0 kills and a death for your side. So this weapon is quite perfect. The only good competition it has is the MG42, which is more famous nowadays, but was less common in real life. Though, until the MG42 gets its own 75 or more bullet version, this MG34 with 75 rounds will be the best German machine gun. At number 6 we have the twins of Ofenrohr and Panzerfaust 100. Many players don't see that these weapons are complementary, meaning you want to play both to get the maximum power potential. Reasons for that are that despite looking very similar in stats, they have 2 significant differences. First of all, the Panzerfaust has 20mm or 10% more penetration, meaning if you're up against some very tough nuts, like an IS-2 or a Jumbo, and you want to penetrate it easily from the front, the Ofenrohr might stumble into issues, especially on longer ranges, but the Panzerfaust won't have these issues. Second difference is, the Panzerfaust is much slower, meaning if you want to shoot at targets who are further away, you need to shoot it in an arc, making it very hard to aim. This requires lots of practice. Also, the further away, the less precise it gets, so you also get some horizontal deviation. The Ofenrohr doesn't have this disadvantage. It flies extremely straight, no matter how far you shoot basically, and it's much easier to aim with. So even if you just unlock the weapon, on your first game, in your first attempt, you will easily hit your targets with an Ofenrohr, whereas the Panzerfaust might cause you some issues. This leads to the conclusion that you want to play both. Even if you are a complete free-to-play player with only 1 vehicle and 3 infantry squads, meaning you will likely have exactly 2 anti-tank gunners in your lineup, you want to give one of them an Ofenrohr and the other one a Panzerfaust 100. And then you do the following. Depending on the engagement distance, if you expect enemy tanks close up, you just take a Panzerfaust and you will have the strongest anti-tank weapon in the game. If you expect enemies longer away, especially if it's an APC hiding somewhere or a tank gray zone camping you, you can easily snipe gray zone tanks even 200 meters away with an Ofenrohr. With a Panzerfaust it's almost impossible. So yeah, having both in your lineup is the absolute strongest thing you can do regarding anti-tank weapons for the German army. At number 5 we have one of the most hated weapons in the game, the Flamethrower, specifically the Flammenwerfer 41. Unlike its little brother, the Flammenwerfer 35, this one comes with a ridiculously long jet length. This means that the only weakness flamethrowers have, their limited range, is only partially a problem here, and what you get is a weapon that's dangerous at almost any distance that you will use it. 32 meters is comfortably enough to hit anything you see within buildings or within trenches and similar environments. The way to get the most power out of your flamethrowers is the following. First, pick the flame trooper squad only if the current objective is suited for the flamethrowers. So if it's an open wide area, you don't want to use them. If it's a closed, especially closed and close area, with many doors and hallways and things like that, then it's prime time for your flame troopers. Then send your normal soldiers in first. So if there's some fighting, some gunfighting going on, these soldiers are gonna die and your flame troopers survive. And send your flame troopers in only once your overall squad is close enough and survived before you expect your enemies. And then switch to your flame troopers and start attacking the point. Initiating the attack with grenades is usually great, especially since that usually distracts your enemies. You can use normal explosives for that, or you can use especially flavorful phosphor grenades for that, because that not only obstructs the view of the targets, but also usually creates panic among defenders. And then you rush in with your flamethrowers and cause maximum damage. Don't really care about your flame trooper to survive. If you do that, you will get much less kills than if you just trade him against your enemy soldiers and try to get 10 to 20 kills with one single flame trooper. This also fits nicely with the real life survival rate of flame troopers, which was rarely above 10%. So yeah, flamethrowers and flame troopers belong together since you can use flamethrowers only on flame troopers. This leads to one advantage and a disadvantage. First of all, flame troopers themselves are possibly the strongest soldier class in the game, since they start out with additional life points, 12.5% more vitality, and you can give them more vitality points plus 35% on top of that. So you have soldiers which have basically 1.5 as much life as normal soldiers, making them very tanky, and on top of that they also have natural fire resistance, reducing the amount of fire damage they take significantly. This means while you're spraying your enemies and the whole room is burning, you can just run around. Even if you start burning, doesn't matter, you will easily survive at least 5 seconds while burning, whereas the enemies can't afford that. Besides deleting hordes of enemies, there's another nice trick you can do with flamethrowers, and it's the following. If you're playing destruction mode and you have to plant or defuse, especially defuse a bomb, what you can do is just flame the whole ground, make it burn, so enemies won't get close to you, and also enemies will have trouble seeing what's going on the ground, since it's burning, and then you rush in with your flame trooper and start planting or defusing the bomb. Usually, it will be very loud, and it will be extremely hectic, panicky, and hard to see. And this will give you exactly a perfect moment to do your bombing work. And since the flame troopers survive for long enough, you will most often have enough time to plant or defuse the bomb successfully. To sum up, why is the flamethrower one of the strongest weapons in the German arsenal? Once you master it, it becomes extremely dangerous, A, it becomes quite reliable to use, and B, if you use it properly, you will create ridiculous amounts of damage to the enemies, and the enemies won't be able to do much against it. And that's also why it's one of the most hated weapons in the game. People who know how to use flamethrowers will get easily the highest kill score in the match. The only disadvantage with flamethrowers is that they are forcing you to have a flame trooper squad in your army, meaning, unlike normal weapons, you can't give them to a random soldier in a random squad in order to use them. Before we explore the 4 horsemen of German weaponry, we have an honorable and a dishonorable mention. One weapon that's luring many enlisted players, myself included, but then disappoints with its ridiculously bad performance, is the sniper version of the FG42 too. In theory, it's absolutely great. It even has better stats than the normal FG42 that we have on rank 8, but the problem with that weapon is the scope. Whereas scopes usually make sniper rifles better, this one gets worse, because you get the maximum magnification power of 4, but you get a significant precision penalty on top of that for your normal barrel. So what you get is a weapon that you can't use on short range. You can't even properly aim with it on mid range, because enemies will move way too fast relative to what you see on your screen. And on long distance, more than half of your shots will miss, no matter how well you aim. So yeah, this weapon is just a ridiculous mess of multiple nerfs stacked on top of each other, making a weapon that was top quality and extremely reliable and effective in real life a completely barely playable mess in Enlisted. The exact opposite of this is a weapon that's highly underestimated by the vast majority of players, and it's the Mortar. Highly confusing for beginners and even more complicated to play once you figure out how to actually use it, the Mortar still is a very interesting weapon. If you get bored from normal gunfighting, from normal shooting and aiming at pixels, this weapon will give you ways to play on a more strategic level, and actually hitting groups of enemies with it from far away, or even hitting tanks with it, is absolutely rewarding. And the best thing is, it's one of the best ways to deal with overpowered gray zone tanks that nothing else can actually reach. If the flamethrower was one of the most hated weapons, number 4 is definitely the most hated weapon in the game, and it's the grenade launcher. Specifically, the Kar98k anti-tank grenade launcher. Why is it the most hated weapon in the game? Simple, people who die against it usually think it's easy to use, and despite that, they struggle hard to actually not die against it. Also, many players get triggered when they lose 3 soldiers to 1 click instead of losing only 1 soldier to 1 click. So evidently the grenade launchers bring all the butthurt, but are they actually as strong as they are feared and despised? Simple answer, they absolutely are. But only if you actually play the grenade launcher really well. Truth is, bad players can easily perform above average with grenade launchers, and that's what triggers other bad players, but if you're up against strong enemies, the weaknesses of grenade launchers become more visible. First of all, if you're up against full auto weapons, you easily get sprayed down. If you're up on long distance, you easily get shot with stronger rifles, or also weapons like semi-auto rifles or machine guns. And if you're up short range, well, then you have a bolt action rifle, unless you want to sacrifice your soldier, and the enemy easily overpowers you with many other weapon types. So, despite these disadvantages, what are the advantages? Well, first of all, there comes a meta disadvantage on top of that, because if you have a squad, usually a rifleman squad, full with grenade launchers, your bots become quite weak, because bots who would otherwise have semi-auto rifles or FG42s could easily get many kills, because the AI is very good with automatic weapons. With bolt actions, the AI is much weaker. Much weaker. Now this leads to the problem that while you're running around with your grenade launcher equipped soldier, you yourself might get many kills, but your bots will get significantly less kills. And absolutely almost no player in Enlisted actually looks at the numbers and does some elementary school calculation to see how is the actual killing output of your overall army if you play grenade launchers or not. So you really need to perform well and play smart if you use grenade launchers if you want to be a really good player. So Is it worth it? Well, here come the significant advantages that grenade launchers bring. First, if you use them intelligently, if you use them similarly to a flamethrower, meaning you wait for a good moment and then whip them out, they become completely devastating. Secondly, once you become good with aiming the grenade launchers, you can hit targets not only on the comfy short to mid or mid distance, but even long range targets far away, especially once you learn to control the curve and then just hit targets behind obstacles. And since we're talking about the anti-tank grenade launcher, not just the normal grenade launcher version, you can of course also deal with armored vehicles. And here's the best part. As a German player, you will fight against Americans or British and against Soviets. The Soviets, even if you look at their strongest armored tanks, you can kill every single Soviet tank with an anti-tank grenade launcher. Most of them easily from the front, even if you look at something like the IS tanks, which is absolutely insane. Even the feared KV-1 tank, the one famous for its almost impenetrable armor, at least on lower BRs, becomes quite a joke once you actually shoot the first time in your life an anti-tank grenade launcher against it. American tanks are even easier target, even the Jumbo if you aim at its weak spot, which is quite huge on the front, or especially if you aim at the sides. If you happen to come up against an enemy tank that's just completely way too strongly armored, well, in that case you can still take out the tracks or the cannon, or you can flank the tank and shoot it from the side, and no at least non-German tank in the game survives a shot into the side with a German anti-tank grenade launcher. So they are completely scary against tanks, but they're one of the best, possibly the best weapon against APCs. The problem with killing APCs is that they, for the most part, don't contain anything explosive. So you can shoot at them with many things, even with high caliber anti-tank shells, they don't explode. They even quite often survive high explosive shells from tanks. But what they don't survive is a good shot of an anti-tank grenade launcher rifle, because these one-shot them basically always. And with all these upsides, you don't get any downsides regarding their anti-infantry capabilities, because it doesn't matter if you use a normal grenade launcher or anti-tank grenade launcher against infantry, they perform the same. So this anti-tank grenade launcher version is just an amazing weapon. And in the right hands, played intelligently, it becomes absolutely overpowered and deserves to be feared. Next, on number 3, we have one of the most underrated weapons in the German arsenal. Actually 2 of them, because it's the twin pair of Sniper MKB and Sniper STG. There are many reasons for people underestimating them. First reason is that snipers as a class are quite problematic for your army management, because you either play a sniper squad with 3 snipers, but the squad itself is limited to 5 soldiers, or you put random snipers in your other squads, which is limited to 1 per squad, and these also compete with other specialist slots. The second reason is snipers have a bad reputation as a noob class and being less effective than other classes when it comes not only to killing, ironically enough, but also to capping objectives, so playing for the win. And third problem, even if you have a good sniper rifle, it requires a lot of practice, a lot of good aim and concentration to get a reliable number of targets shot down. Automatic sniper rifles compensate this by the fact that you can spray into enemies. But if you try to snipe something at long range, you will have significant damage penalties. So that requires you to hit your targets usually 2, sometimes even 3 times. And that makes playing full auto snipers less fun and sometimes even less effective depending on the player style. But, plot twist, all of this won't bother you if you play these weapons the following way. You want the scoped STG as your first weapon and your scoped MKB as your secondary weapon on the sniper. This opens up the following strategy. Since both weapons have basically the same stats and two-shot your enemies basically anywhere you see them on the map, the only difference among them is that the sniper STG has a 4 times magnification scope and the sniper MKB only 1.5. This means that the STG is much better suited for long-range fighting and the sniper MKB much better for mid-range, partially even short-range fighting. And this is why this weapon combination is so ridiculously powerful. If you're engaging enemies at long distances, let's say the worst possible engagement, an enemy sniper with a bolt action that can one-shot you, you still have the upper hand because he has to aim and perfectly land a shot. You can just spray into him the moment you see him without having to aim that well, and it's very easy to land 2 random bullets into him. So you have the advantage even against the worst possible outcome. If you're seeing some enemy groups in the long distance, you can just start spraying your STG into them and you easily get 2, 3, 4, 5 kills before you finish one magazine. So yeah, this is absolutely strong. If enemies are closer to you, you can switch to the sniper MKB and then use the weaker scope, which is perfect for shorter engagements. And then once again you have an advantage, because aiming with a small scope is much better than aiming just with iron sights. And this is also how it was done on the Eastern Front, for example, for 2 reasons. First, Germany was very short on 4 times magnification scopes, but they had many 1.5 magnification scopes. And after having to involuntarily practice a lot with these scopes, many soldiers noticed that, wait, putting 1.5 point scopes on basically every rifle in theory will give our soldiers an advantage, because now on the average engagement distance they are much better off than without any scope at all. And this is exactly the theory behind this weapon combo. Dual wielding the sniper rifle combo gives you an advantage against enemies no matter where they are. And the best thing is, since we have a full automatic assault sniper rifle, we get the advantages of a sniper rifle and of an assault rifle. This means you don't have to select specific targets, you don't have to choose, if you see enemies far away, whether you shoot the engineer who's building something, or the dude with a flamethrower tank on his back, or the curious tank commander sticking out of his hedge. No, you just spray them away all within 2 seconds. And yeah, there's no fighting back. Your enemies need significantly above average aim in order to shoot back. So it's actually good and beneficial for the game that snipers are limited, because if you could play the soldier 4 times per squad, this would be the only thing people would be running around with. With this information in mind, if you want to build your German army as strong as possible, make sure to include snipers wherever you can. I, for example, have one in a sorter squad, in a rifleman squad, in an APC squad, and even in the mortar squad. The only squads where I can't insert them are machine gunners and flamers due to space restrictions and specialist restrictions, but almost all of my army contains a sniper, and it's amazing. Also, it's very fun to start every battle by whipping out your sniper, and either he completely demolishes your enemies, or he catches a shot back after he deleted 5 to 10 enemies, and then you switch to your other specialists, especially once you pushed closer to the enemy, so your other weapon classes can shine. Our number 2 brings us to a weapon that was topping most ranking lists for the longest time and is still regarded as the strongest weapon of the German tech tree. Of course, we are talking about the second version of the FG42. Everything that was true for the first iteration of this weapon is also true here, but the few things that kept the normal FG42 from being overpowered aren't holding this version back anymore, because this weapon just goes full over the top. Comparing their stats, both weapons have almost identical values except for the recoil. And if you remember, the recoil was exactly the problem holding the first FG42 back, coming with 53 vertical and 19 horizontal, it was very problematic to spray that weapon on longer ranges, making it a very dangerous full auto weapon on short range, but mostly a semi-auto rifle on long range. But coming with very controllable 44 vertical and extremely comfy 8 horizontal recoil, the second FG42 becomes an absolute monster because you can spray this thing at all distances and hit basically every bullet. This means that now you have the power of a light machine gun in your hands, but without any of the downsides. You have the high damage, you have the high fire rate, you have the high precision, and you can easily spray while running, while mobile, all your bullets into your targets. Normal machine guns can't do that. First you get the movement penalty, second you get the dispersion and precision penalty, and also the recoil, especially the horizontal recoil, usually prevents your machine guns from being sprayable without being mounted. But the FG42-2 can do everything you want while being highly mobile in any situation. And the biggest problem of machine guns, the fact that you can give them only to machine gunners, which are also a limited class, isn't active here because the FG42 is the standard rifle for the German army, meaning you can put it on basically every soldier. And this means that all of a sudden your standard rifle that all of your soldiers can have, especially your specialists like engineers, anti-tank gunners and so on, and rifle and radio men, easily can overpower most enemies they're gonna face. Because it doesn't matter if your American enemies have 50 round Thompsons, your FG42 is superior to that. It doesn't mean if your Soviet soldiers have PPSHs, because the FG42 is also superior to that. And it also easily overpowers things like M2 carbines and even the Browning machine guns. So this weapon turns every single soldier you have into a complete overpowered deadly Rambo. Such insanely high power, combined with being usable by most soldier classes, were the two reasons why the FG42 topped most enlisted weapon rankings. If there is one weapon you really want to spend the time practicing your aim and controlling the recoil in the German army, this is absolutely it. Once you master this weapon, there's nothing you need to fear anymore. No matter what overpowered weapons the Soviets may bring against you, may it be the AS or the Fedorov or the RD, you will always be able to overpower them by unleashing the FG42-2's power with some good aim and quick reaction speed. So what on earth can be even stronger than this absolute god tier weapon? As explained in the beginning, the main factor determining how high a weapon ranks in this list is being so strong that you want to play this weapon above all the ones coming before. For example, if the price of playing the Ofenrohr or Panzerfaust would mean I cannot have Kiralis or MG34s in my army, I would accept it, because the power level of these weapons is absolutely worth it. Same thing goes for the flamethrowers and the grenade launchers. If I cannot play the Panzerfaust anymore and only play the flamethrower, grenade launcher and the weapons above it, I would accept it. This hard mathematical method of using opportunity costs in order to rank items gives a list like that much more credibility than lists that are ranked on superficial impressions like, oh, which weapon is strong, which weapon is stronger, and so on. Because ranking just like that creates problems when you have weapons that are very close or weapons that are at the very top and you have to make a decision, because what's the strongest and what's the most important one are different things. And if you want to choose what is the best weapon overall, you cannot just look at what's strong on paper, but you have to look at what's more important, what brings you the best results if you're playing serious games, if you're playing high, if you're playing maximum difficulty games, especially if you're playing against organized teams of organized players, or if you just want to win games where your team is very weak and your enemies have a stack and you want to somehow defeat the sweat stack. In these situations, just having the theoretically strongest weapon won't really help you. But having a weapon that always overperforms and that always gives you an edge above your enemies, this is exactly what you want in these situations, and this is exactly our number one spot. The legendary STG-44. Entering World War II, as the name implies, very late, it not only impacted every battle it was used, but also the gun design philosophy as a whole. This newly invented assault rifle concept freed commanders from having to commit to either short-range weapons like SMGs or long-range weapons like rifles, and gave their soldiers a weapon that ensures the upper hand in basically all combat situations. This technological quantum leap not only has historical relevance, but also upgrades your German army in Enlisted to the next level. Whereas the MKB suffered on long range due to its unreliable spray, and on short range due to its slow fire rate, the STG doesn't have these weaknesses anymore. On mid range you are as superior as usual. On long range, thanks to the very low recoil, especially the basically non-existent horizontal recoil, you can easily spray away enemies, you can easily spray into headshots on a regular basis, and thanks to the 650 bullets per minute, you can even spray away enemies on short range against most SMGs. Combined with the deadly 7.5 assault rifle damage on up to 100 meters, this means that every single enemy you shoot at will be dead with 2 hits maximum. Even vitalityed up flamethrowers and paratroopers who sometimes come with additional natural life points. The power of the STG-44 cannot be underrated. The combination of all of its great stats, the high damage, the good fire rate, the fast reload speed, the very low recoil, and the 30 bullet magazine size make it an extremely strong weapon. It's so strong that I even put the slightly weaker version of the STG-44, the MP-43, together with it on number 1. The only remotely relevant difference between both weapons is that the STG is a little bit faster and has a little bit better recoil, though due to the faster fire rate the recoil will be extremer. So overall it balances exactly out that the only effective difference is the faster fire rate. Now this isn't even that much better if you only have MP-43s, because this makes it easier sometimes to save bullets and get more kills than with a faster fire rate that will waste more bullets possibly. So if you wonder whether you should grind for the STG-44 after unlocking the MP-43, my recommendation is unlock more important things first, because both weapons are very similar, and if you finished anything else, you can of course also grind for the STG-44, and after you did so, just dual wield both weapons, because then you can just have the STG-44 as your primary weapon and the MP-43 as your secondary, so you don't waste any resources and still get perfect access to the strongest German weapon in the game. For the end of this video, and in order to motivate you to grind these German weapons, keep the following image in mind. People who play highest difficulty Enlisted have the choice of playing rifleman squads with 9 soldiers and an FG-42 each. If the FG-42-2 was the strongest German weapon, people would play only these types of squads. There's no reason to play any smaller squads, because the only reason to play other squads are the weapon specializations, and why play smaller squads for weaker weapons? But people on a regular basis, and I came to the same conclusion, so I started doing it myself too, figured out that assaulter squads with 22% less soldiers, so with only 7 soldiers, and 4 assaulters equipped with STGs and 3 normal soldiers with FG-42s are superior to the 9 rifleman squads with the FG-42-2s. This means that the firepower of 4 STGs are viewed by the best players in the game to be stronger than 6 FG-42s. This is absolutely insane. So 1 STG is at least as good, at least as useful in your battles as 1.5 STGs. And this difference of power level is just insane. And once you start playing the STGs yourself, you will find out yourself, yes, this weapon is absolutely insane. It's actually that good. So that's it. These are the 10 best German weapons in Enlisted. Make sure you comment your thoughts about this topic, because reading discussions about these types of rankings, especially if they include good explanations, is exactly the best and my favorite way to bring the understanding of a game forward. And of course, like the video, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe so you get more nerd discussions like this in the future. And until next time, goodbye.